Okay, quick question before we get into today's episode. Have you ever gotten hurt doing something so simple and so mundane that you were almost too embarrassed to tell anybody else about it? It's not like you were out running a marathon, not trying to hit a max deadlift, but maybe you just reached into your back seat for something, or you bent over to pick up a piece of paper off the floor. That's it. That's all. And you had a little spasm in your back, or your shoulder felt kind of twingy. You've done the same workout, the same bicep curls, but now all of a sudden there's these like weird joint aches and pains that almost seem to show up without any explanation. If that is you right now, or if that's something that has happened to you maybe in the last 6 months and you're feeling just super confused about it, or honestly just frustrated and irritated about it, I want you to hear this up front. You're not falling apart. You're not suddenly clumsy. And you are definitely not imagining things that, maybe it just is feeling a little bit different than it used to. There is something that is actually happening in your body if you're in kind of that perimenopausal age that has a name. It's got research to back it up and to support it. And it's likely not something that you are hearing a ton about on Instagram or even from your doctor, unfortunately. But today we want to call it out. We want to talk about exactly what to do so that you don't feel at a loss for this. Now, this is something that unfortunately so many of the women that I've been working with recently are experiencing. And it's a little bit heartbreaking to see them in tears over it because, it feels like their body is just all of a sudden betraying them. It's all of a sudden rebelling in ways that just don't even make sense. And so I really just want you to know that you're not alone in this. And I do believe that when we've got some good information behind us, we can really start to ask powerful questions of our providers, but also start to seek out maybe some good resources on what we can do to actually start. Do you find yourself constantly grabbing convenience food or hitting the drive-thru because of your busy schedule? Are you tired of your clothes not fitting and wish you felt more like yourself again? Does the word diet make you cringe because of past failed attempts that left you hungry and deprived? I'm Alisha, a wife, mom, fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle coach for women. After years of dieting, losing, and regaining the same weight, I realized I needed a new approach. I was burnt out from trying to be everything to everyone and chasing a number on the scale. To truly show up as the wife and mom I wanted to be and to finally find freedom in my health meant redefining my relationship to food, exercise, my body, and most importantly, to myself. I discovered the power of brain-based nutrition, fitness, habits, and routines to create a healthy lifestyle without restriction or deprivation. And now I'm excited to share everything I've learned with you. If you're ready to follow a simple brain-based nutrition and fitness plan built on habits and routines designed for busy moms and women, you're in the right place. Let's do this together. Now, first things first is that this is not just in your head and it's not just, maybe a stroke of bad luck. So let's start with what this actually looks like. And I want you to kind of imagine yourself maybe in this position. This might not be where you're at yet, but rest assured, like as you get older, as those hormonal shifts start to happen, as we get closer to what is affectionately known in some circles as cougar puberty, there are going to be some things that end up happening most likely. And so I want you to be prepared for it if you're not there yet. If you are in it, I want you to know that you're not a lunatic, you're not imagining it, and you are likely, unfortunately, in good company because there are so many other women that are walking through this right now. So a lot of times this can show up as a shoulder that maybe starts to just lose range of motion over a few weeks until one day you literally cannot lift your shoulder up over your head or past a certain point. It's like, it's not even that it's just painful. It won't move. It's like all of a sudden you have restricted range of motion. Maybe it shows up as a knee that is feeling a little bit more tweaky on a walk, or, if you're playing pickleball. I'm kind of smiling because I have so many clients right now that are playing pickleball. And while there are so many great things about it, you just want to make sure that you are training for it and that you are warming up properly. That's what I'll say about that. But maybe it's a tweaky knee from a walk, from doing lunges, from hitting the pickleball court. And while you've done those things 100 times before and have never had an issue, all of a sudden your knee is starting to feel a little bit tweaky. Maybe you're noticing, plantar fasciitis or issues around, your Achilles tendon and your heel and your ankle, whatever it is. Maybe it's hamstring stuff, glutes, all of the different things. Those aches and pains are, while they are kind of showing up for no reason, like maybe there was no injury or no thing that you can actually point it back to, what we're going to dive into today is there is, kind of a reason that this is happening in us women as we get closer to menopause. So all of these things, maybe it's these injuries that seem to be kind of popping up out of nowhere. Maybe it's just feeling like your recovery from injuries is delayed and is now taking much longer than it used to. The part that can make this feel so disorienting is that nothing on your end has really changed. It's not like you've started a new sport all of a sudden. You didn't make some drastic increase to your mileage or to your lifts and how much weight you're trying to push. Maybe you find that you are actually doing less than you used to, and your body is still kind of acting like you're beating it up day after day in your workouts, in the gym, and just sometimes doing, daily living activities. So let's talk a little bit about what is going on underneath this, because there's a very real, very researched explanation. And it's not just that you're getting older in kind of that sort of vague way that is talked about so often. But before we dive into the science, I want to really kind of sit in the part that maybe you're not hearing about quite as often, which is what this can do to you on the inside. And this is a little bit of that mental and emotional battle that you likely are experiencing, or that kind of creeps up, is where, it really feels like your body is doing things it's never done before. And of course, the first place our brains don't go is to curiosity, right? A lot of times it's suspicion. And really, it's more suspicion of yourself. You start wondering if maybe it's something that you've done, or maybe you're not working hard enough. Unfortunately, I think that's the thing that we kind of go to is, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I need to be doing more. But then there can also kind of be this fear that develops around exercise and around movement, because if there's already pain there, of course, we don't want to cause more damage. We don't want to hurt ourselves even further. So then you might find that you go to that other end and you completely back off of movement and activity of all sorts, which is not going to be the answer long term. So if you, are starting to kind of doubt your body and become suspicious of yourself, that is also pretty normal, right? Again, that's that mental, that's that emotional side of injuries that I don't think we talk about near enough. Whether you're around menopause or perimenopause or not, getting injured and having a setback like that can really be one of the most challenging things that you will ever experience on your fitness journey. Because for a lot of us, it's like we try to get back to it too soon and we end up prolonging our recovery. Or maybe we just get totally afraid that, we're going to hurt ourselves even worse the next time. And so we back off. It can also be just this doubting of what's going on in my body, what's wrong with me. If you have kind of a history of being a super active, super fit person, then it can really feel a little bit like a shift in your identity that is completely unexpected. A lot like when your kids leave the house and for so long you have been mom and so much of your life has been oriented around taking care of your kids. And then all of a sudden they're independent and they don't need you quite as much. It can really be that same kind of like identity shift that just shakes you to your core. So underneath a lot of that doubt, underneath a lot of that suspicion, there can be that grief that is starting to surface because for a lot of you out there listening, your body has been maybe one thing that for the most part you feel like you've been able to count on up until this point. You could always push through, you could always bounce back. And now it feels like the rules for what works for your body has changed without anybody telling you what those new rules are. And you don't find out until you're actually injured and hurt. So, on the inside, maybe it's that whisper that there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I did this to myself. Why did I push so hard? We can go into sort of that condemning voice, that very accusatory voice, which can really shut you down and actually keep you from addressing it. Because if you think that it's your fault, if you think that you should have known better, then a lot of times that plan that we were following, we start to use against us. We start to use it as punishment. Maybe you end up not actually going and getting the help that you need because you are embarrassed, or, it's if you've had other providers tell you that a lot of these symptoms that you're experiencing are just in your head, then it's really easy to kind of dismiss what you're actually walking through. You might think then I just need to be more disciplined, more strict. I just need to push harder to kind of prove that my body is not falling apart. So we can really go into that overworking, overtraining mentality. And of course, that's only going to make things worse as well. Now, if you're thinking this shouldn't be happening to me, you're right. But here is really what I want to kind of get into plainly is that you can still do everything right, everything by the books. You can train, you can eat as best as you can work on your recovery and take care of yourself. And there are still going to be some things outside of your control that happen. Your body is still maybe going to go through some of these changes, or you're going to get some of these random injuries. And I get it. It can feel really unfair. And, truthfully, it is a little bit unfair because up until recently, there really hasn't been a lot of talk about what happens in a woman's body past a pregnancy and past, puberty and things like that. And now we are starting to hear more and more about menopause, around perimenopause, around those hormone shifts and what's happening. So we are thankfully starting to get a little bit more of a manual of how to navigate this season of life. But a lot of times the information that we're receiving more is maybe a little bit better suited for where we were at and where our bodies were when we were in our mid-20s and maybe even our early 30s. Again, we're kind of the last ones to know that the rules are changing. So if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling betrayed, maybe you're even feeling a little bit gaslit by your own body, I want you to know that that can be a completely reasonable place to land and to be. Again, this is not you. This is not something that's wrong or broken with you. It's just your body is changing. And maybe there's been a little bit of a gap in the information that we're receiving and then how we are implementing what we are learning. So let's start closing that gap now. Now, like I said, I have seen this so much in the clients that I'm coaching recently. It could be a shoulder issue, like the frozen shoulder, or maybe just kind of an ache or a pain in a hip, in a knee, in an ankle, in a foot. And it is one of those things that can be really hard. I mean, I've even noticed in my own body, there are some things kind of shifting and changing in some of my joints, and definitely having to kind of shift the way that I train and the recovery and even some of the exercises that I'm doing so that I don't flare those things up. And the hard part I think about this is that so many of those women feel like they are alone. It feels, like nobody else gets this. Nobody understands. Maybe people just think I'm crazy because of this. Or for me, a lot of times it's hard to be vulnerable about, my knees flaring up or this thing is kind of showing up because for so long I have been, in my mind, kind of a fit, active, healthy person. And to then all of a sudden feel like there are going to be some limitations around what I can do. That can be a really hard thing to grapple with. So, you're not the exception. You're not the only one walking through this. And I don't say that to, not validate where you're at, but hopefully to let you know that if you are experiencing any of these things, you're not alone. You're in good company, and hopefully kind of providing a space for you to talk about this a little bit more. When I'm working with my clients, every time we get into what is actually starting to happen in her body hormonally, a lot of times that guilt, that shame, it kind of starts to lift a little bit because it's not necessarily anything that she's doing. And there could very well be things that we could tweak or change, conversations to have with your primary care about whether or not HRT is a good fit for you. But, when we can kind of move through that guilt and that shame, that's where we actually have access to start to come up with a more useful way of looking at this, and our plan can kind of shift and change without it being something that's wrong with us. We can just look at it a little bit more objectively with a little bit more curiosity, and that is always going to help us be more strategic and come up with a better plan. And so that's really what I want to walk through and build with you today. We don't want to scare or kind of live in fear. Definitely, I'm not your doctor and I'm not a doctor, period. So we're not diagnosing anything. And I definitely don't want this to be one more thing that you feel behind on, but to just kind of share what some of the more recent research is saying, trying to break it down as, if we're just two girls, two gals hanging out talking, for you to really stop second guessing your body and start training with it instead of against it. Okay, so what is the name for all of this? In 2024, a team of orthopedic researchers led by Dr. Vonda Wright published a review in the medical journal. I'm going to do my best to pronounce this, Climacteric. I probably totally butchered that did something that really has been kind of overdue for a long time. They gave this cluster of symptoms an actual name: the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. Of course, it's going to be a mouthful because it's a scientific name here. So here's what they found is that more than 70% of women going through menopause transition, which includes perimenopause, will experience some form of this. 25% will experience it severely enough for it to be really disabling. And here's the detail that maybe we need to hear the most. 40 of these women will have normal imaging. So their x-rays, their MRIs will come back clean, which means a huge number of women are really just kind of maybe being told that their pain isn't real. Maybe it's in their head, it's unexplained, when there is a well-documented hormonal mechanism driving it. So, you could get the scans and those could come back clean. That doesn't necessarily mean that the symptoms you're experiencing are not real and they don't exist. So if you've ever had a doctor look at a scan and just kind of shrug and say, we don't really see anything, everything looks fine, and just kind of stop there, I want you to kind of take this as maybe your sign to kind of speak up for yourself, advocate a little bit more, and ask some follow-up questions. Or, then you take that next step and you seek out some other resources that are going to help you get to the root of your pain and the problem instead of just brushing it aside. So just because it doesn't show up on a scan doesn't mean that there's not anything wrong. It just means that maybe that wasn't the best way of diagnosing what's actually happening. So what estrogen is actually doing for your body, which we know as we're going through perimenopause, as we're getting older, going into menopause, our estrogen levels start to decline. So what is the mechanism behind all this? It comes back, as so much in this stage of life does, to estrogen, specifically estradiol, which is the primary form of estrogen in your body before menopause. Estrogen isn't just a reproductive hormone, it's a maintenance hormone for your entire musculoskeletal system. So for all your muscles, all your bones, it helps regulate bone turnover, which is why bone density loss accelerates around this transition. It supports your muscle repair and maintenance, which is a part of why lean muscle becomes so much harder to hold on to. And it plays a direct role in how your other soft tissue, like tendons, ligaments, and cartilage, are built and repaired. The last piece is the one that most of us don't really think about. We think about bones, we think about muscles a lot, which is great, but our tendon health, our ligament health, our cartilage health is also incredibly important. And that's really the one for most of us that explains all of these sudden injuries that we're talking about. So here's where the research gets genuinely interesting. And I want to be upfront with you about some of the real complexity because let's face it, in science, it feels like nothing is ever kind of a clean, straight line. We can almost always find something that contradicts another study, but a 2019 review out of UC Davis, published in Frontiers in Physiology, looked at how estrogen affects muscle, tendon, and ligament tissue across a woman's life. What they found is that estrogen's relationship with your connective tissue is not simply more is better. So during your reproductive years, when estrogen is high, like during certain points in your monthly cycle, it actually decreases the stiffness of your tendons and ligaments. That's part of why younger female athletes have measurably higher rates of ACL tears than men in comparable sports. High estrogen can mean looser, more pliable connective tissue, which under the wrong load actually becomes a liability for us. So if we flip, though, to perimenopause and menopause, the story changes again. As estrogen declines during perimenopause, it doesn't just decline, it swings wildly and unpredictably. Your tendons start to lose some of their ability to regenerate collagen efficiently. And a study out of Denmark actually was able to measure this directly. In that study, women using estrogen replacement therapy had a significantly higher rate of new tendon collagen synthesis than women who weren't. So if we kind of break that down, like what does that actually mean? Estrogen appears to help your tendons repair themselves. When it declines, that repair process slows down and your tendons and ligaments become stiffer, less elastic, and slower to bounce back from the load, which is a very different mechanism than what's happening when we're younger with the ACLs. But it points to the same theme. This tissue seems to be estrogen sensitive. And when your hormones are unstable, it has an effect on your connective tissue as well. So, if we put those two things together, during perimenopause specifically, your estrogen isn't just dropping. A lot of times it's fluctuating, sometimes, in big swings and shifts from week to week. Some researchers describe this as a mismatch between the load you're placing on your body and what your tissue in that specific moment can actually handle. So that's a lot of times why it feels like these injuries come out of the blue or just happen all of a sudden. It's not like your form got worse or, or you were just being sloppy with your movement. That internal hormonal environment is genuinely less predictable in this phase of life than it was, in your 20s or your 30s. And your tissue is starting to respond to that in real time. So I want to give you a concrete example because I think this might help a lot of this stuff click. Frozen shoulder, medically called adhesive capsulitis, is a condition where that shoulder capsule joint thickens and tightens, sometimes just over a few weeks, and can leave you literally unable to lift your arm. The research is still sorting out like the exact ratio. Some studies say women are affected somewhat more often than men. Others say up to 4 times as often, but every single source agrees on the pattern. It shows up way more in women than men, and it clusters hard between those kind of, typical or average menopause years between 40 and 60. I don't think that's just a coincidence, right? That's really that exact window where estrogen is doing the most fluctuating and declining, and your connective tissue is just kind of caught up in the middle of it. So the next time your shoulder, your Achilles, your elbow, your knee, your low back does something dramatic and unexplained, hopefully now you feel like you have some idea of what could be going on, some language around it. It's not necessarily random. This is not you being fragile. This is a well-documented hormonal transition that is affecting the majority of women that go through it. And there is a lot that you can do about it. So hope is not lost. So here's the part that I really want you to hear, because I think I have an idea of where your brain might want to go right now. It could want to go into fear, right? It wants to just wrap up in bubble wrap and, stop moving, stop lifting, stop running, maybe stop doing all of those things that make you feel like you. That is absolutely not the answer. And honestly, it would make things a lot worse. Movement, especially weightlifting and resistance training, is one of the best documented tools we have for supporting bone density, preserving muscle, and giving our tendons and ligaments the same kind of resistance and load that they need to stay strong and stay healthy. So the goal isn't less here. The goal is to maybe just look at training in a smarter way for where your body's at now. First, of course, progressive overload, but maybe we take a more patient approach with this. So your tissues can absolutely still get stronger. It just may need a little bit more time under a given load before we add more. So when you're younger, you're able to, maybe increase your weights a lot more rapidly. But as we get older, we definitely want to slow that down a little bit just to give our body enough chance to catch up. So if you used to maybe jump up 5 pounds every week, that can feel like a really big jump at this point in your life. That's not necessarily weakness. That's just your body letting you know that maybe we need to take it a little bit slower with that overloading. Give your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, your bones a slightly longer runway to adapt. Second, prioritize protein. And we want to do this consistently. So not just around workouts, not just around on like the easiest days, but really focus on being as consistent as we can in hitting our protein targets. Muscle-centric medicine researchers like Dr. Gabrielle Lyon have spent years making the case that adequate protein intake becomes even more necessary, not less, as we age. So because muscle is one of the most metabolically protective tissues we have, it needs the raw material, the amino acids essentially, to build and repair. Third, don't skip the boring stuff. So stuff like mobility work, a proper warm up, even, 5 to 10 minutes of doing some different exercises to get your joints to kind of warm up. This really is not something that we can afford to skip anymore as we start to get older. It needs to be considered as valuable to your training as the actual lifts themselves. It's that runway for the tissue that needs a little bit more preparation than it used to, right? So you just want to make sure you're giving your body adequate warm up and don't skip those little exercises that you hate to do. Fourth, and this is maybe the one that most women skip, is to get some support. Hire a coach, join us inside Fit and Fueled. So instead of trying to, piecemeal it together or guessing or figuring it out on your own, this is really the stage of life that working with someone who understands what's happening in your body and not just generic fitness advice can make the difference between an injury that is going to put you out of the game for 6 weeks or more and a program that actually supports you, understands you, knows where you're at, and adapts with you. So none of this is about doing less. It's also not about like going to the other extreme and just trying to do more. What it is about is training like a woman who understands her body is changing. And instead of, just trying to do the same thing that used to work for you in your 20s, it's learning to pivot and adapt and meet your body where it's at and give it what it needs in this season. So, those are going to be completely different approaches. One is most likely going to continue to sideline you. The other one is going to actually help you thrive through this next season. So, what happens if you treat every one of these injuries as a personal failure and you just try to grind through it? One of two things tends to happen. So either that injury gets worse because stiffer, slower healing tissue is not going to respond well to being ignored. So that pain's just going to get worse. Your symptoms are going to continue to increase, or you just end up getting so discouraged that you quit training altogether. Maybe you decide that it's just easier to, not train because you don't want to get injured again. You don't want to be frustrated or disappointed with your body. So you just throw in the towel and stop trying. The second thing that I see a lot, and this is really what breaks my heart the most because it's exactly that all or nothing trap, just maybe in a slightly different flavor. So either we go all in, training hard, pushing through injuries, trying to prove ourselves, or you're all the way out, right? Sidelined, defeated, convinced that, this is just what getting older is and feeling like there's nothing that you can do. But there is a middle path, and this is the one that is built on the best information that we have at this point and not that all or nothing thinking. So I want you to imagine, maybe you're on the other side of menopause in your, 50s, 60s, 70s. You're still lifting, you're still moving, you're still capable, not because you were ignoring what your body had been telling you, but because you had learned to read your body's signals and then respond appropriately to what your body needs. You know when to push, you know when to back off. When something is kind of flared up and firing, it's not time to push through it. It's also maybe not time to completely back off. It's just time to pivot and to shift. You've got a program that respects where you're at in your life, where your hormones are, and is not just trying to force you into what worked when you were in your 20s. You're able to move through your life, picking up your kids, your grandkids, still carrying your own groceries, going out on the hike, catching up with your girlfriends, maybe still playing pickleball if that's your thing. And, knowing that while certain things may be inevitable as we get older, we don't have to just completely let those run and rule our lives. And that really is what happens when we're understanding what's going on in our bodies instead of, just fearing the symptoms or being too inundated with too much information and not knowing how to sift through that. So if you walk away with anything today, here is what I want you to hear. That sudden soreness, those tweaks and pains and aches that show up out of nowhere, none of that is your fault. None of that is proof that you're falling apart. It's maybe just an indicator that you are in like a real hormonal transition that affects so many women out there. And it comes with a mechanism and it comes with a plan to go with that. So you are not the woman whose body randomly turns on you. You can be the woman who finds out what's going on, why it's happening, and do something about that. So if you are a woman who is tired of knowing what to do, but still not following through, still not doing it, you want real support, real accountability, and someone in your corner every single day, that is exactly what we do inside our community. We have a few different ways that you can work with us. I know we're all in different places on our journey. So what I want to invite you to do is to go to thestrongerway.com/work-with-us. The link will be in the show notes. You can check out what we have going on there and figure out where the next step is for you, what that next best step is for you, and where to get started. Your homework this week is simple, is to just pay attention to your body. Just notice what's going on. And instead of, letting that little voice kind of creep in that there's something wrong with me, just use what your body is telling you as information and then make that next best adjustment for where you're at and what your body needs. We'll be back with you again next week. Until then, keep showing up for yourself. That is the Strong Her Way. I hope you have a great rest of your day and an amazing week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Strong Her Way. If you're ready to redefine your relationship with food, exercise, and yourself, remember it's all about building habits and routines that fit into your busy life without restriction or deprivation. I hope today's episode inspired you to take the next step on your journey to a healthier, happier you. Don't forget to follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you found this helpful, please leave a review and share it with other women who need a little extra encouragement. Together, we can all become stronger. Until next time, stay strong and keep moving forward.